on right now. It usually takes a second to come up. We're getting this up, and it says we're not on, but I know that's false. We are actually on. And let me record this to the cloud. Just floating up there, the cloud. All right. All right, we're recording, and I think we're on Facebook. As best I can tell, we are. Let's see. We on Facebook? All right, great. I'm not on my Facebook yet, but who cares? It's Wednesday. That brings us to another edition of Whiskey Wednesday. Somebody was asking me last week, they're like, well, how many of these do you do? I go, well, how many Wednesdays are there? That's about it. I mean, we really don't miss that many throughout the year. I mean, maybe a couple because of holidays or whatever. I don't even miss that many, although I will miss 2 weeks. I think I'm out. But anyways, that doesn't matter. All that matters is this Wednesday.
That's right.
Right?
The most important Wednesday.
Because it's Sagamore. Yeah, Sagamore. And Dan Braganca?
Yeah, you got it.
I got it.
You got it.
Braganca is our mass market activation manager. That's a mouthful. That's worse than your last name. But he's here tonight representing Sagamore. Sagamore, I will just tell you, we have been, Julio's Liquors has been involved with Sagamore since pretty much its inception.
Oh, yeah.
As soon as it came to Massachusetts, we jumped on this, and we've been doing stuff. And we're actually going to go, warm up the, Mr. Peabody. I'm going to warm up the time machine because we're going to try some stuff on this that goes back to when our first project with you guys. But tell me what's been going on with Sagamore, because there's some real exciting news going on.
Oh, yeah. We've so when we originally started the company, we were, like many whiskey distillers, contract distilling with MGP. We were taking like our sort of recipe and having them distill it until our still was built. Our still finally came online in 2017, and we've been distilling ourselves since then, but we had to sort of like work up to getting enough aged liquid to kind of like fully go 100% Maryland. So as of this year, 2024, we are finally officially 100% Maryland in our kind of main whiskey.
That's great.
That's the main kind of like exciting thing. Thank you so much. Yeah. And with that, we sort of actually relaunched our signature whiskey. So we kind of did a little bit of a package redesign and to go along with the different whiskey inside. So we changed the proof. We changed the labeling, and so we're really excited for everybody to try kind of what's completely our own whiskey.
Well, while we talk about it, let's do that's in slot number 1. That's the first whiskey we're doing tonight.
Yeah. So you can take a look at slot number 1. So this is our kind of small batch whiskey. For us, obviously small batch for kind of seasoned whiskey people, it doesn't have like a legal definition. For what we mean is it's about 20 barrels per batch. So truly a small batch for a whiskey company. And we always keep it that way, and we blend it to taste. It tends to be a kind of around the same amount of ratio and aging per batch, but we do it to taste with our team. And so this one you can kind of taste yourself. We'll start by smelling it.
Has anybody been to Sagamore? Yes. I think we should do a day trip.
Yeah.
Huh?
Please go down. It's a short flight.
No, we just take the flight out of Providence. Yeah, it's only a 45-minute flight.
Yeah, it's super easy to get there.
And it's like 20 minutes from the airport.
Yeah,
because I know I had a layover and I went and visited approved stuff and got back on a plane.
Yeah, if there's no real traffic, it's like 20 minutes.
Yeah, it's really not bad. That smells great. So the still's name is Penny. For those of you not familiar, the still at Sagamore's name is Penny.
So Ryan's gonna rename.
I wanted to name this Penny's Pride. And I think it would have been a good name for the whiskey, and they could have told the story and put it on the back label.
Maybe we'll do that in the next label printing.
One.
Well, so actually, I mean, so we've been kind of working up to this. We've been tasting our sort of like fans and stuff like that down, like our what we call our whiskey thieves, down at the distillery. We've been kind of like doing what we call pennies proof. So you go down like early in the morning, you pay a penny, and we give you a little like this kind of uh small bottle of our what became our kind of our own whiskey, our small batch whiskey. And so we got to let people taste the progression of how it's coming, and so they can see like what they think. We did it at different proof levels and things like that. And so we eventually kind of, once we got enough to bottle it completely and sell it to kind of everybody in the market, which was this year. But it was kind of great to see the little bit of a progression. Before that, we were just doing we were blending a certain amount of our, increasingly more and more of our own whiskey into the contract distilled whiskey. And it was
And
great.
I think that's since you said that, that's a good point to bring up because, what you had before and a lot of people source, but it was a little bit different than just sourcing. It was actually a contract distilling.
Yeah, so it was really
it was done
interesting.
to your
It was
specific.
done to our specific. So, little background on the style of whiskey we do. If you're not super familiar with Sagamore, we make what we call is a Maryland style whiskey. It's not a legal definition; it's a stylistic one. So in early American history, Maryland and Pennsylvania were the two early rye producing states when whiskey was sort of the main spirit in America. I mean, rum was still obviously a big thing as well, but when whiskey was really gaining in popularity. And so Pennsylvania was making what most people consider the most dominant rye style today, that really earthy, spicy style, usually like 100% or 95.5 mash bill. And so what Maryland's rye was a little bit softer, a little bit fruitier, still had a spice. It was still made with rye, obviously. It's still a majority rye product, but it was a little bit more south than Pennsylvania. So there's a little bit more corn grown. So there was corn in the mash bill, and just the distillers down there were obviously trying to sort of have a more approachable, softer, fruitier style of whiskey. And then eventually, what happened a lot in American history, they started taxing whiskey a lot, and a lot of the distilling families, like Jim Beam and Basil Hayden, those families started in Maryland and then left Maryland to Kentucky, which was a territory at the time, to escape taxation, and then basically invented bourbon there. So Maryland style rye actually predates Kentucky bourbon by about 150 years. And so we were the first distillery since World War II to try to remake that style. We went back to the history books. We didn't like copy a recipe or anything, but like we got a sense of like how people described it, and like some old tasted through some things we could try to find, and talked to a lot of historians, and sort of developed our version of what Maryland style rye is. And so when you taste the whiskey, you'll notice it's not that super earthy spicy. It's more kind of that fruit spice.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
How many of you have had the new one other than today, right now? Yeah, the new one. I've had the old one, which was the 86, right?
83 proof.
83 proof.
Yeah.
What do you think of this? What do you think of the new one?
This is 93.
93.
Yep. So up 10 points. We considered obviously keeping it still at 83. We tasted through a bunch of different versions of it, and sort of basically we just liked the 93 a lot. It gave it a little more character. To me, comparatively, if you remember the old one, if you've had it before, to me it was really like honey, light, a little toasted marshmallow, some cherry notes. This one, you get some of that, but it's a little bit more rich and kind of bold. To me, I got a lot of brown sugar, cinnamon spice, almost a little bit of figginess, but still get those kind of like honey and cherry notes as well. Those are my tasting notes. You're obviously welcome to taste whatever you like.
You guys like this one? That's really nice. Yeah, it's sort of it does hover on that. If you're not really that crazy about rye, this is your rye.
Yeah, I always tell bourbon drinkers. So some people like who are like kind of exclusively bourbon drinkers, they're like, "Oh, I don't like rye," and they sort of write it off. I always tell people, give Sagamore a chance. Like taste it, especially when I'm doing tastings and things like that. A lot of bourbon drinkers really like our style of rye. It has a lot of those bourbon notes. There is corn in the mash bill. It's a low amount, but we kind of like really kind of present it a lot. And you get those kind of fruit notes that you would in a bourbon. It still is a rye. You're still going to get a lot of spice character. So if you're a rye lover, you're obviously going to like this. But bourbon drinkers sometimes can gravitate toward it as well. It's a good kind of bridge over from bourbon to rye. That's sort of like a little bit more complex, kind of spicier style of whiskey.
All right, that's really nice. I like that one.
So I'll answer it this way. It's a little bit of a complicated question. It's not that I'm being evasive about it. We do a blend. So what we do is we take two different whiskeys. We take a 95.5. We age that separately in charred new oak, and we take a sort of barely legal kind of 52%, 43 corn, 5% malted barley. In both cases, the malted barley is really there for fermentation reasons.
Right.
You're not getting a lot of flavor on that.
Kickstarter.
And so we let those age separately and then blend them together. The blend tends to be about 85% of the high rye to about 15% of the low rye. So what we found, I actually asked our kind of head distiller, Ryan Norwood, I'm like, why didn't you just put it all together and that ratio and then age it? And he's like, well, we tried that actually as well. And it does taste different. We've done some special projects where that's the case. And like when we do barrel finishes, obviously we do that kind of blend all into one kind of barrel finish, which we'll talk about in a couple whiskeys from here. But the science is a little complicated, and you just get sort of just natural variation when you're aging things in separate barrels.
Well, it also gives you an opportunity to blend to taste.
Exactly.
So you can play around a little bit more and dial it in.
Yeah.
If you break them apart.
So we can break them apart. We can kind of dial it in a little bit. Also, like the double oak is sometimes tends to be a slightly different ratio. We can do it that way. Also, my like hunches, I don't have like, exact science to sort of back this up, but when I taste a really young bourbon, if you ever taste a really young bourbon, corn matures a little bit slower than rye does in a barrel.
It tastes grainy.
It tastes a little grainy. It tastes a little green. And those really nice fruity flavors that you get in like nice, well-aged bourbons don't really show up for at least kind of 4 years, in my opinion. And then when you really start hitting that sweet spot at like kind of 5, 6, 7, 8, we sort of, when we age this kind of the low rye mash bill in the separate barrel, it sort of allows it to like mature a little bit faster. We get a little bit more of those kind of fruit flavors. We can kind of control that. And I think that does a lot for directing that style how we want it in terms of that kind of fruitiness along with the kind of rye spice.
Okay. Seems fair enough. What is the age?
Generally speaking, it's like we call it 4 to 6. We don't put an age statement on it. It tends to be about 5 years old on average for our small batch.
But it can be different ranges because you're putting them together anyways.
Yeah, exactly. It will never be younger than 4 years. I'll put it that way. Yeah. So it tends to be just how we sort of do it to taste. Mostly I've heard it tends to be in the 5-year range for kind of both parts of the blend. But yeah, so 4 to 6 would be official. Yeah.
Okay. Yes.
Yeah.
If you're doing 20 barrels in a small batch, how consistently can you be from batch to batch?
Pretty consistent. I mean, it's really hard to tell the difference. I mean, the only difference I ever really noticed when I'm just like tasting through different batches, and again, I'm not on the distilling team, I just make that clear, but is just the progression of the product. I noticed a big difference when we've sort of transitioned from more of the Maryland grown and aged product. Maryland itself gets a higher range of temperature, a larger range of temperature than like either Indiana or Kentucky does. So you sort of get like lower lows, higher highs. And also the grain's a little bit different. We can get deeper into that if you'd like to, but it's a little bit of a richer product because you get more interaction with the oak. And so as we added more of kind of the Maryland's exclusive product, it got a little bit bolder. Does that answer the question? Yeah. So consistent. Yeah.
20, it is a small batch size, but you're using enough barrels. And because I was talking about dialing it in, since you're using 2 mash bills, that gives you a little bit more control in a shorter range of barrels.
Yeah. And you get quite a
Because-
bit of whiskey
because-
in per
yeah,
barrel too.
per barrel. Yeah. All right. Number 2. Because this is the double oak.
The double oak.
Now, a lot of people are really jumping on this right now.
This
This is sort of growing.
Is our fastest growing in sales. And probably as our most kind of talked about from our core lineup, in sort of like the kind of, we'll call it the whiskey nerd world. It actually started as a bit of a mistake. Someone, since like I was saying, we were blending barrels, and someone sort of like misdumped a barrel sort of thing. So we were like, oh shoot, we don't know what the ratio is. So we like, independent stave company had come to us early on and they had developed a new type of stave, what they call a wave stave. It basically looks like a Ruffles potato chip, so grooves, so you get more surface area on the staves itself. And again, they're not like wood chips like you throw in; they're actual part of the barrel. The staves, they're just grooved out. And so we actually said no to them initially.
It's grooved and then it's treated,
toasted.
That's what I'm saying. But
so the different toast level
right.
compared to our other.
Right. It's not like you toast it and then you put the grooves in.
Exactly.
It's grooved and then toasted.
Yes, that's a good point. And so that gives us a little more character. And so we were like, oh shoot, we have this big batch of like whiskey that we like kind of screwed up. Let's try it out. So we like ordered some barrels from them, and we put it in, and we like really liked it, and we thought it was kind of a cool. So we did it as a one-off, and we got a lot of like good feedback on it. And so we basically kept doing it, and we like obviously like dialed it in. It wasn't sort of just like hodgepodge. But
it's afterwards. You're like, how do I repeat that now?
Yeah, how do we repeat that? How do we improve upon it? Because it was just sort of like a little limited release. And to me, I don't know if this is actually true from what the marketing team did, but you'll notice our gold top on these. Those are usually signify our kind of limited releases. And I don't know if it's a little nod to it or not. I gotta ask if they like kept that as sort of like a nod. It's the gold top style on the double oak. So that's
gold top, but it's got the checkerboarding.
The checkerboarding from the Maryland flag.
Right.
And so yeah, so we sort of, that's part of our core lineup now. And we've started aging it a lot longer than we used to. If anyone out there in listening or in the room has tried our double oak like only like years ago and hasn't really gone back to it, to me, we actually started increase the second amount of aging. So we basically take our kind of how we make our regular small batch whiskey, a good 4 to 6 years, and then that's blended together, and then we put it into a secondary barrel for an additional 18 months. Originally, it was probably around 6 months or so, and so we did it for an additional 18 months, and then take that out, and then that's proof down to 96.6 proof. And that extra aging really did wonders. To me, it's like a lot richer. It's doesn't have that big tannic taste. Like you get almost this like rich vanilla caramel.
It doesn't go over wooded.
Yeah, it doesn't go over. We actually tried it longer aging in the secondary barrel in the double oak, and we didn't actually like it as much. So we kind of hit the sweet spot at about
what we call the church pew.
Yeah, exactly.
It's enough wood. It's enough wood. Oh, it's a church pew, which means it's just too woody.
Yeah, because we also put it at the very top of our rick house, so it gets the most heat and the most interaction with the barrel. So we want really that big, bold, oaky flavor. And it's great. And so like it's our head distiller's personal favorite. And if you like big oaky styles of whiskey that have a lot of nuance as well, this is excellent. It smells phenomenal. You get so much aromatic on it.
Look at the price and stuff, and it's under $60.
Yeah, which is like a great deal on like, I mean, if you just compare it to something like Woodford Double Oak, who really sort of like, I don't know if this is official, but like they basically made double oaks a thing. I feel like that was the bit one that really hit big first. So this is always, if you like that style, you can kind of try a rye version of that with our own spin on it. To me, I get, instead of like pure oakiness, I almost get this like rich coffee on the finish. Like that's to me the tasting note that I always come back to. And I think it's great. It makes great also just like excellent like kind of traditional style cocktails, if you like those kind of big stirred cocktails, and those are big ones that you call for extra spiciness to it. Goes well with bitters. I think this one's also worth always trying with a couple drops of water. I think this one, I don't always recommend adding water to whiskey. I think it's a kind of a personal preference. You can, some I like better
Yeah, but a
with, some
couple
I like
drops
better
is
with.
gonna just relieve surface tension. Just gonna open up some aromas.
Yeah.
that
So
you
this
would-
one I think is like really particularly nice with a couple drops of water.
if you don't want to dilute it down, do the Randall Bird method, which is drink some water and then drink this right afterwards,
Yeah. It's good.
and sort of get you some of the same effect. I like putting the drops in because the I can nose it.
Yeah.
And the nose you'll smell more, but
Yeah. I get like a little more sweetness on it with
yeah.
water.
really good.
Oh, great.
Now you're talking about sort of like cocktails. The next one sort of gets us into that sort of realm without actually making a cocktail.
Yes. So our team is always trying to do like kind of innovate, push the envelope. And so they came up with a really fun idea, what we're calling a Manhattan finish. We didn't want to do a bottled cocktail. We wanted to sort of keep it true to like, a true whiskey. But if you haven't had this one before or heard it explained, we're doing barrel finishes with this. We take sweet vermouth barrels, bitters barrels, and cherry brandy barrels. After we take our regular whiskey, we age that separately in each finishing barrel and then blend it together and basically create a new whiskey that has subtle characteristics of a Manhattan cocktail. So again, there's no sugar added, there's no flavorings added, but you get those little bit of like those kind of cherry notes that you would in a Manhattan, those vermouth notes, obviously, and those like little bit of kind of herbal spice from the bitters barrels, plus just obviously the whiskey. We wanted to keep the proof quite high on this one comparatively, to sort of like, we didn't want the sweetness to overwhelm. We still want to be a true whiskey, and not sort of like a total novelty. And so we kept the proof high so the sweetness wouldn't overwhelm, but I think we hit the balance really nicely with it.
Guys, try this one and see what you think of this one. So let me get this straight. So you take, you blend everything first and then put it in these other barrels?
We take our regular kind of blended whiskey,
Okay.
and then
You divide it up.
divide it up
Okay.
into
The other barrels.
the other barrels.
Okay.
So we had no idea how much we were going to use of each barrel at first. So the bitters barrels was the most interesting. We had to like source a bitters barrel, which is not super common. And so we did a whole barrel of it, and
You needed this much.
we needed about, for the entire batch of whiskey, we used an eighth of the entire barrel. So we basically were stuck because it was so strong. We're like, it was basically bitters. So we're like, it was so strong. We like couldn't add a lot. We're like, oh my God, what are we gonna do this? I mean, I think at the distillery, they just made bitters and sell it just at the distillery. But yeah, we're like, oh wow. So we have a lot of this bitters whiskey.
Yeah, but you can always put that in stainless steel when you're done and just add it every time.
Well, that's what we
let it
do.
age.
So yeah, so we do have that because this is actually the second batch of this. It went over really well. We kept it very small on purpose. I think only 36-pack cases total came to Massachusetts, the entire state. So very limited release. So if you see it, obviously at a place like Julio's, like that's one of the few places you can get it. And so we kind of did purposely small batches to sort of keep it special. And if we ever want to sort of we typically don't re-release whiskeys, like kind of limited release reserve series whiskeys. But this one we decided it went over so well the first time. It's obviously a little bit different blend. It got different vermouth barrels, aged a different amount of time. But it was we got a lot of people loved it a lot, and it was sort of a fun thing for us to kind of try to recreate and sort of.
It was a delicious novelty, so why not keep it
delicious
going?
novelty, so why not?
And then, plus you were only using 1/8 of a barrel for bitters, so
Yeah.
Right, exactly. You had batches to go before you were going to finish it up. I think it's really interesting. What's the ABV on this one?
This one is 103. Let me just double check that. Yep, 103. Sorry, the proof is 103.
Proof is 103.
Yeah, so 51.5. What's that?
Yeah, it's got a good spice to it.
Yeah.
You can actually, the funny part is I know you're using not a lot of bitters, but you can taste them. I mean, they're there.
Yeah,
I mean, you cannot miss them.
To me, it's obviously part of the proof. You're getting a little bit more spice because
it's showing up because of the alcohol too.
And the alcohol, and then obviously the bitters. Like it's not it doesn't taste exactly like a cocktail. Obviously, it doesn't have this kind of the sweetness. But it, like you get those sort of like juicy cherry from this cherry brandy and the vermouth, and then that little bit of balancing kind of herbal bitterness on like to me on the finish. It really comes.
Yeah,
out.
but see at 103, you can put this in a rocks glass, throw a rock in, and you pretty much have. I mean, I know it's not technically a mixed drink.
Yeah,
I'm being lazy again, but I can throw a rock in and get a pretty much a Manhattan.
that's almost exactly
rocked
what we
Manhattan.
intended. So for this one, we actually sort of intended people to drink it that way. We kept the proof a little bit high also for that reason. We figured people would want to drink it like a Manhattan. So add a rock, little spin, kind of dilute it down a little bit. You can even throw a cherry in there if you want to and sort of sip it like a Manhattan. So, because if we kept the proof really low, if you added the water and ice, it would be way too diluted and it wouldn't kind of like taste great. And so we wanted to keep that proof high enough that if people decided to drink it like a Manhattan, it would also taste good both ways. So it's great by itself, or if you wanted to add ice or water, it's also going to taste great.
What do you guys think of this one? Like it? Yeah. That's pretty unanimous on that one. I didn't ask you guys, what did you think of the double oak since we're going back? Like that one?
Yeah. Any specific questions about either of those last two or anything in general so far? Good on those?
This is the new double oak.
Yeah, so it's been new for a few years now. But yeah, I mean, obviously there's more of like our kind of juice in it. And we've also given our expansion of our rick houses. We have one sort of farmhouse style rick house.
I've been in that one.
And then we have two sort
front.
of like much larger ones that are not kind of like sexy to look at. They're just sort of like where
they're big rick houses. Yeah, they're big rick houses. Yeah. They're not supposed. Contrary to everybody's belief, the rick house is not supposed to be sexy.
Exactly.
It's supposed to be very functional.
Yeah, it's very functional. And so, like, as we sort of like filled them up, and got higher up in the rick house, and we get sort of that, it's hot. It becomes hotter in there, and vice versa, and colder in the winter. So you sort of get that interaction we're looking for.
The new rick house is down by the water too, aren't they? Are they down by?
No, where are they? They're sort of. We don't officially
Where's the
say
exact
where
location? I just want to like. Where
we don't say where they exactly are, but they're they're north of Baltimore.
Right.
So they're about like 30 miles or so north, or give or take. Yeah,
I like.
There's no reason you'd want to actually go there.
Well, there's a lot of reasons I'd actually go there, but
yeah, there's actually there's actually space for if we want to add a third rick house up there. We have the space for it. But
that's awesome.
Yeah,
really good. I like this one a lot. Yes. All right, so I'm gonna take over just slightly on this next one,
please.
So for those of you who don't know, we do a lot of projects on our own. We do it with what we call our partners across the globe. I mean, we do stuff with Jack Rose and Bill Thomas down in Washington. We've done stuff with them. But our main partner that we do stuff with, we've been doing it a long time, is we have a lot of fun with, is Benny's in Chicago. Brett Pontoni up there is a good friend, and we've been doing these like wackadoo projects from time to time, and we call them, if you ever see them, they'll be called U.S. mail projects. Us, Benny's and Julio's, us, and then M.A. Massachusetts, I.L. Illinois, U.S. mail project. So that sort of fits in there. So anytime you see a U.S. mail project, it's Julio's and Benny's that are in charge of those. So we first, one of our first projects was actually with Sagamore, and we were doing a Armagnac finished rye, and we figured, oh, this is gonna be great. We'll throw we'll have a blend. We'll throw it in there. We'll throw it in the Armagnac barrel, and in a couple months it'll be done, and we'll bottle it up. It'll be great. Well, the first one, 3 years later, because we kept getting samples, we'd be like, I'm calling Brett, and he's like, it's not done. I go, I know it's not done. And we tell him the crew down in Maryland, like, gotta leave it in longer. It ended up really being, it almost was 3 years before that was done. It was a great whiskey. When it finished up, it was fantastic.
Which is very long for finishing if you're not familiar.
It's actually aging. Yeah. It's actually aging, because finishing, like I said, like we figured 2-3 months, that's actually a finishing portion. you're getting everything you're really going to get out of the Armagnac, but it just really needed. We didn't know what it actually needed. We just knew it needed time.
Yeah.
And we said, we're going to wait on this one because we're tasting it. We go, no, it's going to get better. We know it's going to get better. And it did. And that was the, was that the Armagnac? Yeah, Armagnac.
Yes.
And we did that one. So, fast forward, this isn't even out yet. You guys are going to get to try. You're the first people that are going to get to try it. Shh, don't tell Brett at Benny's because he doesn't know. But we figured we were doing this tonight. We definitely need to let you try this. So this is a Park Cognac, which is Park is the name of the cognac that we're using for this. This is a Park Cognac Finish on this rye. Now, I will tell you, it is done. This is what we want. And this is actually being pretty much bottled as we speak.
Yes, absolutely. Yep. As of like a week ago, but basically this week. Yeah.
This week. This is being bottled. So you're the first people to try it. It hasn't really been bottled yet. It will never be exactly the same until we bottle it. But we figured we'd let you guys try it and see what you thought. All right. So this is number 4.
I really like how this came out.
So it was Benny's turn. It was Brett's turn to do the one, and he came through. This is a great barrel that he's a cognac barrel that he's doing. I think we told the distillery he needs that barrel back.
Oh yeah.
So that's going back up
so
to
last
Benny's.
time with the Armagnac casks that we used to age our rye in it from the first thing we did.
Yeah, you screwed up.
You also used that in a
Oh yeah, we actually took that Armagnac barrel back, and we used that in the Canadian. I don't know if you guys remember the Canadian whiskey we did with Copper and Cask. So that was the rye Canadian that we did that one, or Canadian. That one was used for that, and that came out great too.
Yeah,
so it was a really good barrel.
This one is really fun. Like I get so much like spiced honey on this,
like dark honey.
Yeah, really dark, rich honey.
I mean, so the problem with us doing these together is we get samples separately. So Brett gets samples, I get samples. I might be away, or Brett might be away, so it might be weeks before we get to the sample. And we got one of the samples, and I'm like, oh no, this is done. And Randall tried. He's like, oh yeah, this is done. We're ready to go. We sort of had a meeting in there, and John and Gio were all like, this is done. This is done. Tell Brett this is done. But he has the final say because this is now his project. So we let whoever starts the project gets to say when it's finished. And he was away. We were like, come back soon.
Yeah, I'm like, soon.
Come back soon. Has anybody heard from Benny's? No, we haven't. And
furiously emailing my counterpart in
Chicago, making sure, is he back? He's back. And he tried, and he's like, oh yeah, that's done. Please bottle that. And so these are being bottled right now, or were a week ago. And so these will be here shortly.
Yeah, we still got to do like label design,
get the label and all that stuff,
so
right?
I don't want to give you a timeline.
But we wanted to stop the process, though.
Yeah, so it's not going to be. It's going to be as close to as possible in terms of flavor as this right now.
Yeah.
Just in terms. So for like aging on it, this one's actually a good amount of time in the cognac cask as well. It's 2 years, 7 months. As of bottling. In cognac barrels,
this wasn't on my watch.
Yeah.
So it's like it's Brett's projects. I'm like, still needs longer.
Yeah. So this
and they're going like it's all 2 years. I'm like,
this one is
it's not ready.
6 years in sort of our regular casks, and then in about 2 years and 7 months additional aging. So over 8 years, about almost 9 years total aging. Also, I don't know if you're familiar with cognac casks, but they're
bigger,
a bit bigger than traditional American whiskey casks. So that also is part of the reason you can sort of age it a bit long. You might need to age it a bit longer.
Let's get that
you have
more
a
surface.
Smaller barrel. You have more, you get more interaction with the wood. So it sort of, for lack of a better term, speeds the aging comparatively to the cognac barrels.
What do you guys think of this? This is at cask strength too, by the way. You like this one? Yeah, this is gonna be people are gonna want a lot of this.
Yes,
This is really, really good.
drinkable at
Yeah.
cast strength, which is 118 proof.
yeah.
It doesn't taste like it's blow your doors off hot.
No, it's really drinkable. It's real approachable.
Yeah, so I think this came out great.
I'm glad you guys like it because this is we'll probably got like maybe a month or two,
Yeah,
months, 2 months.
let's say that.
month?
But yeah,
Yes, Lisa. What we're gonna bottle it at? Yeah, cast strength.
yep.
We're leaving it right where it is.
Yep, keeping it
We're
that.
at least interaction that we can get on this one. We just loved it so much. They were like, "What do you guys want to do?" We like just the way it is.
Yeah.
And that's what you're gonna get. And I don't think it's too crazy. It's not over 120, so it's like 118.
A lot of our reserve series, our finishes, we tend to do close to cast strength. Depending on how you're aging and what you're aging it in, the proof can just dramatically be different from like different series to different series. This one stayed relatively high at 118.
Yeah.
It's like 118.5 actually.
Right.
So which is one of the higher finishes we've ever done.
Oh, you didn't have any? Okay.
I have I have a little bit. If people want to,
okay. Yeah, no, that's fine. But this is I love this one. I think this is going to do exceptionally well.
Yeah, I think just the cognac and whiskey, like
cognac and rye, cognac
really
and Armagnac, both in rye do
like
very well.
Cognac, if you're not cognac drinkers, it tends to be like a sweeter spirit, and you obviously get fruitiness from the grapes. And then like the spice of the rye, I think that's why rye in general works really well with finishing, because sometimes like you get these like really sweet bombs on.
Well,
like,
we did the maple syrup one which was another one.
Yeah, so we did a maple syrup, and I think rye and maple syrup obviously like works really well because you get the spice, like it's not overly saccharine. That's also why we tend to try to keep things at cast strength. So in cognac you're getting a lot of kind of like pear, apple, kind of like grapey flavors, which can be perceived as sweet, and sometimes they even like in cognac making they sometimes dose not
part cognac.
Spirit, yeah, but not part cognac. And so the spice of our rye and the fruitiness of our rye really goes well with the sort of like the kind of fruitiness of the cognac.
This is going down too easy.
Yeah,
it's really good. As Matt would say, one is none. So you're gonna have to get a couple. In Maryland, what's the angel share?
It's I forget what the exact amount is, and it depends on where in the rick house it is, but it's substantial. When we started moving things over to our sort of like industrial rick houses in Maryland, compared to Indiana and things like that, we lost quite a bit more whiskey, enough that like it affected the yields quite a bit. And in effect, which also affects the proof quite a bit. So you're losing more to evaporation in that case. We don't we always keep our kind of whiskeys not super high. It's not like something like a Booker's where it's going to be like, a million proof points and like really super fiery. We want to sort of do a little bit more traditional sort of proofing, like, with modern distilling techniques, you can actually get really high proofs on whiskeys and spirits. But like, in early American history, when Maryland whiskey was a thing, cast strength was not substantially higher than like, say, like 110 or so. And so and we also want it to be really drinkable at cast strength. We didn't want it to be super, super hot. Just stylistically, we have done a distillery only release of our cast strength whiskey at a much higher, like, plus 120 amount. I forget the exact amount, but like it was still really delicious. But yeah, it was interesting seeing one of a Sagamore whiskey at a really high proof. And so I'm kind of like, personally as sort of a whiskey nerd, I want to try it all. And like, I want some super high whiskeys. I want some sort of like medium strength whiskeys. But our finishes tend to end up being a little bit lower anyway. I think because of the size of the cognac barrel, it ended up being a bit higher than what, like, say, our Manhattan finish is for that reason.
Yeah, it's really good. I'm really I'm stoked that we're gonna get this. So
yeah,
keep an eye out. Keep an eye out. What's that? Well, it's gonna have the back to school supplies coming. All right. So the next whiskey you're gonna try. Can you hand me that bottle for me?
Yes.
Thank you, because I want to explain this one right. This has a medallion on it because this was actually our first project that the good people at Sagamore who didn't know any better let Randall and I run amok or awry in in the distillery. So this is called a rye 421. And what that basically was is we took 4 barrels, the 2 different mash bills, and we blended those together. So 4 barrels to basically 2 barrels. And then we took those two and we blended them for again. All right. So four barrels, the 2 batches to 1 barrel.
Yep.
And so we brought that in. We wanted to see, because of the different mash bills, we were really curious how to see it, and was all a marriage all the way down. As a matter of fact, I think we have a film of Randall actually marrying the barrels together with his dog collar and everything.
Russian doll of whiskey.
Yeah,
here.
Russian doll of whiskey, but it all sort of flows into one sort of product. When it was all said and done, it came to 85% of the high rye and 15% of the low rye.
Which is sort of amazing. So I don't know if you remember from what I was saying earlier. So our typical blend is around 85% high rye to about 15% of the low rye. But that wasn't always the case. And when we first started doing barrel selects, we were sort of letting consumers really kind of choose their own sort of like ratios.
Yeah.
We stopped that pretty early on.
You're welcome. We pretty much stopped that right in its tracks. So, oh my God, this just went really crazy. We're not doing that again.
So there was
hence the name of rye.
Exactly. There was really multiple reasons we stopped doing it. One, just like the logistics of it was like super complicated. And then you're left over a different amounts, and it becomes like, how do you do this like economically? And like, it's just also just very work intensive.
We helped with this one. We actually went to the distillery and did this stuff.
And so, but another reason we didn't want to do it is because when people were trying our whiskey, think of an average consumer, not sort of like a super educated consumer, like, your typical Julio's consumer. Yeah, right. You just sort of try a Sagamore whiskey and you're like, oh, that's what their whiskey tastes like. And so when we sort of like were kind of figuring is when you
go outside the box,
if you go too outside the box, right, and then they try the whiskey and it's like incredibly different from our typical range of flavors, they might get a wrong, like not to say wrong, but like wrong impression of what the brand typically offers. So we started doing a more of a sort of like a 80-20 or so kind of blend, and we'd let people choose their barrels and things like that. And it would sort of still be unique to them, but it was like, within a set parameter.
The funny part about that is Randall and I wanted to do this and get as close to the ratios as possible.
Yeah.
By using the barrels, but still maintaining the Sagamore spirit.
Right. Exactly.
And so we actually worked at how we did this to actually fit into the profile.
Yeah, and it's
and now when you try this is at 95 proof,
which you'll never find enough. Just for the record, you'll never find another Sagamore whiskey at 95
proof,
because our regular whiskey was 83 proof. Our typical barrel selects,
we felt was too low. But
yeah, was about
first thing we're changing was the proof.
We're changing the proof. And so a lot of our barrel picks were coming off at 110 or so. So the funny that they ended up at 85 to 15% ratio and 95 proof. And now our small batch whiskey is essentially that ratio done a little bit differently in 93 proof. Way back when is sort of amazing. Cause like I
think they kept a couple bottles to say, hey, how do we make this again?
How do we make this again?
That's the story, and I'm sticking to it.
Yeah. So this one is like nice and light. What's also interesting about this too, and so early on in our sort of like whiskey journey, we were, we didn't have our farm running at full capacity itself for the grain. And so a lot of the grain was coming from different places. We've actually changed rye varietals that we use as well. We worked with the University of Maryland to work with local farmers to sort of produce rye. Rye rye is a really hard crop to grow for a variety of reasons, and it's not often profitable for farmers.
It's more the profitable part than hard to grow.
Yeah, I mean that's
And especially if you pick a weird varietal, that's what makes it hard to grow, because certain varietals
exactly. And it really, with the reason the economics are difficult with it is corn is subsidized by the U.S. government. So if you lose crop to, like, a bad climate year, you're still sort of like insured, so to speak, as a farmer. But with rye, they don't do that. And so we were having a lot of difficulty trying to convince farmers. So we were buying on the open market. We were growing a little bit on our farm. Our farm's not big enough to completely grow. We grow 100% of our corn, like our non-GMO corn, on our Sagamore farms. And we grow a lot of our rye, but not 100%. It'll never be 100% just because it's not big enough. And also, you don't want to be too locked into one farm, because if you have a bad year, something happens, that's not good for business.
You're screwed.
But so
I'll say you're screwed.
So how do we build up the Maryland farming? So what we do is we pre-buy their seed and insure their product from different Maryland farmers. So like I said, we worked with the University of Maryland to, like, basically teach these farmers how to grow these, like, whiskey, great varietals of rye for whiskey production. And
it's all about alcohol yield.
Yeah, we get yield, and there's a little bit difference in flavor. And so might supplement with the open market, but we're getting essentially everything from Maryland now. And if they have a bad year, we still pay them. So we try to get everything as local as possible. We just think it's better practice for the environment, better practice for whiskey. We also, since we work with those farmers so in depth, we also just get the best of their product. And so we can really control exactly what we want in our whiskey. So we're like, we're in the future, we're sort of working on projects to grow sustainably as possible, like the trees for our barrels that we want to do. We want to try to even get Maryland grown wood. That will be like probably a much farther down the line sort of thing before that, because trees obviously take a lot longer to grow than rye does. But yeah, we're trying to really build the brand up the right way. And you can actually see it from, this kind of older spirit, just the evolution of it. It's like, this is super delicious. And, Ryan and his team obviously did an amazing job picking out the mash bill, and just sort of how it was built, and the proof level, I think, is really nice on this as well. It's sort of a great little nostalgia trip.
What do you guys think? Right?
This one is not for sale, by the way.
This one's not for sale. Unfortunately, it was at one point if you jumped on the bandwagon early. And this was something that, like, this is one of some of the first projects that we went in, and actually it was more of a hands-on. We're going to stop manipulating everything.
A good lesson of, like, what's the difference between the aging in Maryland versus other places. So this is basically the same proof. So the color's not affected by the water level. You can see the difference in color. I don't know if you can see it from this on the camera very well, but it's a lot darker is the small batch compared to this. And that's the color is coming from the barrels.
But, never be deceived. The flavor profiles, because we show this all the time, is like, don't drink with your eyes, because the flavor can be
totally
a lot deeper than you think it's going to be.
Yeah.
Not in this case, but I'm just saying in general, just be aware of that too.
Oh yeah. That's true for all spirits, and also true for wine, beer. If you ever watch, like, I watch, people talking about beer on YouTube and things like that. And, like, this guy from Treehouse, he'll do like some blind tastings in like dark cup sometimes to sort of like
throw yourself off.
So it's obviously nice when, like, the visual, like,
matches up.
Yeah. And you want it, like, it's nice to drink with your eyes, but you don't want to exclusively do it. You really want to taste it independently, and then together.
Yep, absolutely. Well, first of all, I want to thank you for showing these today, giving us the sort of the core lineup, plus a couple little surprises. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me.
We said that a lot. I want to thank everybody for coming tonight. Don't go anywhere. We're going to say goodbye to everybody on Facebook. You can go back, of course, and watch this on Facebook, or you can go wherever you get your podcast. Look for It's the Liquor Talking right there. And especially if you're having insomnia, they're really great. Get you to sleep. But this was a really great tasting. I thank you so much. You guys should have, people that are watching at home, you should have been here. But thanks a lot, and we do appreciate it.